This can be a very dirty, dirty word, beginning with S. And to tell you the truth, I'm considering full-on retiring from it. So to give you some context, I've had 14 professional fights. I've had amateur fights. I've had kickboxing fights. I've had Muay Thai fights. Also, I've been in the gym pretty much having fights with adults since I was 12 years old. Through this time, I have never ever been dropped. I've been cut, I've been hurt, but I've never really been stumbled. Oh, and most recently I've had my jaw broken, but I've never been stumbled, I've never been dropped, I've never been like full-on concussed from any of these shots. The only time I've had a concussion where I've lost consciousness in my life, I kicked a fence at school and the fence bounced back at me because it was that windy. And then I passed out like 5 minutes later. But never been knocked unconscious. But I'm considering following the prime Tony Ferguson and the Max Holloway comeback strategy of completely ditching sparring. This is something that would take a lot of confidence to do, having confidence to step into the cage without having sparred, without having simulated the fight in that way in the run-up to it. But MMA is a mad sport. Most of the sports don't practice full matches to get them ready for full matches. Whereas in MMA, people lace up gloves, strap them up, put shin pads on, maybe some head guards, and then pretty much have fights in the gym to get ready for a fight. I've had a lot of head impact. Possibly the amount of head impacts at a subconcussive level I've taken now in my life are the same amount of blood echoes you would get for defeating the Orphan of Kos. And that's not really an exaggeration, especially if I include little bumps here and there that I've got off of grappling. Sometimes actually grappling has the worst head impact in training, weirdly enough. But what is the minimal possible dosage of sparring that I can get away with? I've really been thinking about this ever since I got this injury in a controlled spar, this jaw injury, and I was in hospital thinking about how I haven't got paid a penny for this. It's really been on my mind. I was also thinking, because I was in a bed next to an older gentleman, possibly had dementia. He'd recently had a facial injury, and I could see his wife caring for him. Very cute couple. It's not a situation I want to inflict on the person I love. My question is, what is the minimal possible dosage of sparring that I can get away with to prepare me for a fight? Because I've always been a big sparring guy. I've always had fights, planned to have a long time off the sparring, and then I get greedy. I'll think I'll have a little technical spar, and by the end of the week, I've sparred a stupid amount of rounds. And most research that you come across, if you type it in on Google Scholar, generally doesn't find good neurocognitive outcomes for increased sparring levels. Finds worse brain volumes, worse cognitive performance and symptoms and all this, that, and the other thing. There's a little thing about caudate volume. It might increase caudate, which could potentially protect you from a really big singular head impact, but that's quite a tenuous outcome at this level of research. And I'm not a neuroscientist, so none of this is medical advice. What is the minimal amount I can get away with? Max Holloway reportedly didn't spar in the run-up to the second Volkanovski fight and the Calvin Kattar fight. Two absolutely incredible performances, even though he lost the former. But when I was watching his recent training vlogs, his coach was talking about him having brawls in the gym and knocking out heavyweights in the gym. So I'm kind of conflicted at how much truth there is. Tony Ferguson apparently didn't spar in his prime, in his heyday, but he did take a lot of shots in the fight. Maybe his chin was just fresh from not sparring, but also defensively, he did have some holes. Maybe that the lack of sparring didn't help him with. Robbie Lawler supposedly went a long time in his career without sparring, but in his biggest run, where he won the UFC title, that was when he moved to ATT and then introduced sparring back into his routine. I'm wondering, what's the minimal amount? Can I get away with just 3 weeks of sparring, just 4 weeks? I've heard Tyson Fury will only spar 4 to 3 weeks before a fight. Probably before the Ngannou fight. I don't think he sparred at all. I want to be healthy. When I have kids in the future, I want to remember their names, unless they're little shits. I want to remember all the attack patterns of all the different bloodborne bosses. I don't want to lose that. I will always fight so long as I'm healthy to do it, but I'm just really considering how to change my preparation and how to have the least possible amount of head impact in the gym, how I can have the least possible amount of head impact that I don't get paid for. Been training for about 15 years and I had my second staph infection ever. It meant I had to take a week no contact. But what I did, even being on antibiotics, I just did cardio, solo drills, had a little quarantine corner where I hit the bag, just practiced that way. And what happened when I came back a week and a half, no rounds, and I'd just been drilling, I'd just been doing fitness, is I had the best rounds of camp that I had in ages, the best rounds of sparring that I've had in ages. So maybe the volume needs to be reduced. Maybe you just need to sharpen the knife just that little bit. You don't need to run yourself into the ground. Let me know in the comments of fighters you can think of that haven't really sparred or do no spar or do minimal sparring that are really good to study. And if you've got any suggestions on what's the minimal amount of sparring to do.